Welcome back. Today, lawyers for the Trump administration will be back in court over his immigration policy. In just a few hours, a three-judge panel in San Francisco will hear arguments over the administration's deployment of California National Guard troops to Los Angeles to protect ICE agents. Now, this comes after that court ruled that the White House can keep control of those troops for now, despite steadfast opposition from top Democrats in the state, and of course that lower court ruling that ruled the opposite. Let's bring in NBC's Gary Grumbach for more on this, and John Amaya, former deputy chief of staff and senior advisor to ICE. Gary, a major legal back and forth between California and the federal government. Remind us where things stand and what we're expecting at this hearing today.
So the arguments we're going to hear today, Anna, are whether or not the appeals court should continue its pause on Judge Charles Breyer's order, which ruled that the National Guard of California needed to be pulled out of Los Angeles because they were not sent there correctly in the first place. Now, as you'll remember, the Trump administration told the adjutant general, essentially the head of the California military department, that they were going to be activating the National Guard, but they didn't formally notify the governor of California. The judge ruled last week that goes against several different legal statutes. Now, in the original lawsuit, California's attorney general said that as long as they are protecting federal buildings and protecting the people inside federal buildings, they are welcome to stay in Los Angeles, but they should not be part of immigration enforcement and they should not be conducting civilian law enforcement. Now, the Trump administration argues without them, they say Los Angeles would be burning, and that they are crucial to keeping the safety and security of one of the biggest cities in the nation. Now, this is going to be a fast-paced situation. Within 2 hours on last Thursday, you went from the judge's ruling in San Francisco in the district court to an appeals court staying. I expect this to head to the Supreme Court in the coming weeks. Ella?
Yeah, and then will the Supreme Court take it up? How fast will they move? There are still a few steps to the process. John, the administration at this point maintains control of these National Guard troops, and that lower court order wouldn't even apply to deployment of the 700 Marines in the area. So what do you see as the potential impact of this legal battle on ICE's day-to-day operations in California? Could this create any confusion on the ground?
Yeah, so I agree that this is a very interesting legal question that is likely to work its way up to the Supreme Court. But in terms of real operational capabilities, I think it's important for people to realize that if ICE wants to do its job, full stop, it can. It doesn't need National Guard. It doesn't need the United States Marine Corps to do the work. And the reality is that the issue before the American people and before the court is going to be, what is the president's authorities to use its directives under Title X, which is what gives the president the power to roll out the National Guard in various situations, normally in cases of emergencies. However, the real tricky issue is that what's at issue is their capability to operate as law enforcement, and that's typically reserved under Title 32, which is the purview of a governor and the state to use the National Guard. And so I think it's a very delicate issue, and it's obviously yet to be unfolded. But the reality is ICE can do its job. It has a history of being able to do its job without the need of the National Guard or the United States Marine Corps.
I mean, you just simplified it for all of us for years and years. Administration after administration, now ICE has done its work without the use of National Guard having to assist. Gary, meanwhile, there's this internal memo that NBC News obtained that revealed ICE's Homeland Security Investigations team was set to pause immigration enforcement action at certain work sites, particularly agricultural work sites like fisheries, meatpacking plants, restaurants, and hotels as well. But this morning, we're learning DHS has now reversed that guidance. What's going on?
Yeah, that's right. So last week, NBC News had reported that ICE was going to pause workplace raids, essentially, at hotels and hospitality areas and agriculture, meaning farms across the country. Now, this morning, ICE is seeming to walk that back. The Department of Homeland Security seeming to walk that back a little bit, saying in a statement, worksite enforcement remains a cornerstone of our efforts to safeguard public safety, national security, and economic stability, saying there will be no safe spaces for industries who harbor violent criminals. But President Trump last last week, just a few days ago, was saying that he didn't want to impact the farmers and the hotel owners that may have been having workers that had been in the country for decades and were good and hardy workers here, only to be replaced by what he called illegal aliens or potential criminals here. So this is just yet another instance of the president saying one thing and then his agencies and his department heads doing something and saying something completely different. Anna.
And it just fuels more confusion. John, let's get your reaction to this. What do you make of what appears to be ever-changing immigration enforcement strategy here? Do you think the administration has thought out the day after taking actions?
Just saying that it's fascinating because I think the president had it right at first, which is to say that this really is a question of labor shortage. It's not a question of a criminal invasion. But the reality is that we've also heard the administration say that they can't pick and choose. They can't decide which laws to enforce and which not to enforce. The reality is that law enforcement across the country and across the globe makes discretionary issues every single day. They make the determination whether they're going to stop someone who's attempted manslaughter versus someone who's ran a red light. That's a discretionary issue that law enforcement makes every single day. And in this case, we're talking about something akin to running a red light or speeding, because at the end of the day, the vast majority of these people who are here, their violation of crossing and presenting themselves at a port of entry impermissibly at the wrong time yields them a penalty of $50 to a maximum of $250. So I think they need to reflect on what they really want to do and what their messaging should be.
Such good context you provide. Thank you, John Amaya and Gary Grumbach. Thanks so much for that conversation.